So, delighted that all of you could join in the conversation today. You'll see there that the poll uh, that we're kind of launching off with has now been closed, and there were really four thoughts about what you want to get out of today's webinar. And you can see that the top choice was professional development for myself and team, followed by tools to be a better leader in this new reality. And by the way, it should be noted that, you know, if you're a leader, senior leader, director, senior manager, it doesn't matter, C-suite leader, you know, these kinds of environments, external environments, really are opportunities to learn to lead and manage differently, or to add to our leadership and management portfolio in terms of tools and additional resources to know how to lead and manage effectively in a new environment. So we'll talk about that a bit. Then coming in third would be strategies to help me navigate my business. And then finally, insights on how to personally cope. So we're going to try to hit all of those in different ways, and we'll go from there. So Priscilla, I think we're ready to go. Do we remove the poll from the screen? Do you do that? You want me to do that?
I just removed it from everyone's screen. Hopefully it went through.
All right. Good deal. All right, so let's just talk about the structure for the webinar. We're going to go till about 11:40, 11:45, right around there, at which time I'm going to hand it back to Priscilla. And Priscilla will then kind of manage the Q&A period. We'll run that for about maybe 12, 15 minutes, depending. And she'll explain that whole process to you. So we want to leave some time for you to raise questions or just to share some thoughts that would be helpful to all of us, all right? So I think with that, we'll go ahead and begin the conversation. So in thinking about this season and this experience that we're all going through, the thought occurred to me, probably, and you as well, that learning to lead differently really is required as we go through this season of disruption. Leading differently, managing differently, or kind of adding to the way we lead and manage, given the circumstances. That's really what's imperative right here. Self-management too really is a key component here. So I wanted to emphasize both because I don't think it's possible to lead effectively, to manage effectively, to engage in professional contact with our organizations and our teams, our people, if we're not also carefully monitoring what we're going through on a personal level. Really believe that. This coronavirus disruption is really, from my perspective, shifting the very tectonic plates of just what we expect every day out of life. It's exceeding my expectations of what disruption would look like in this environment, as I'm sure it is with all of us in many different respects. So that's really what we're focusing on. And again, granted, to be honest, we can't do justice to everything that's taking place in our world, certainly in our own communities regarding the disruption. We can't do this, you know, in 40, 45 minutes. But what we want to do is just kind of lay some groundwork so that we can have some ongoing conversations. I also want to say that as alumni, I'm honored to be having this conversation with you. You know, you're part of my family, my GGU family. And although I don't know most of you, I saw a couple of familiar names, we do share many of these things in common, right? So I don't know where you live or what you do, but I do know with some pretty strong assurance that we're experiencing somewhat of the same disruption in our lives, personally and professionally. I think the tack I want to take here is really to kind of move into a personal conversation and acknowledge the fact that this is not easy. Not only is it not easy, it's just extremely difficult to know how to navigate this season of disruption. So just for some thoughts around goals and outcomes for the webinar, I just wrote down a few that I think were important. Just take a look at that. We want to make sure that We're going to build some community connections and cultivating networks as a part of this conversation, right? To know we're not alone. Now we know that, but it's easy to feel that way. And especially if we don't know what to expect. We need to lean on each other and stay connected. I've always believed that. I continue to believe that. Second of all, this is really about an opportunity to expand our professional development, really for the heart and the mind. And I mean that from both perspectives. How do we feed and nourish our knowledge and what we are experiencing? How can we process that in, kind of into everyday actions and strategies for our professional growth? And then the hard piece really is exactly that. How do we take care of what we feel, who we are, what we're thinking, our own well-being, our capacity to thrive? Because both right now are taking hits, you might say. So how do we monitor both and take care of both? Thirdly, we want to just briefly touch on the importance of continuing to invest in our knowledge and our expertise around issues that relate to the season of disruption, in particular leadership and management. We have to lead differently. We have to manage differently in this time of discontinuity, when things are shifting so quickly, when there's so much fluidity to what we're experiencing. We just have to be ready to adapt in any way that's required of us. We want to take care of our well-being. So many of the people that I've worked with over the years, and I'll just share with you that as a faculty member at GGU, I'm honored to be working in the School of Undergraduate Studies as a department chair for undergraduate management. But I also do a lot of leadership and management consulting. So I work with clients in the United States and globally, and I'm hearing firsthand what they're going through. And I can tell you that our experience oftentimes is shared and in alignment with others that are working in different parts of the world. So number one is, let's make sure we're taking care of our well-being and expanding our capacity to really thrive, to know how to thrive in a circumstance like this, as difficult as it is. And how do we move forward professionally and personally? And then finally, we want to equip professionals at all levels of the organization to really engage in personal stewardship outside the organization. That is just to take care of ourselves, to know what we need to do to handle ourselves, to deal with systemic anxiety, stress, and fear, the kinds of things that so many people are experiencing on a daily basis. So these are just some of the goals and outcomes that I've included in the webinar today. There'll be others, but these are some of the things that are important to me. Okay. I remember years ago doing my PhD research, which I've continued to, in a sense, pursue over the years, really studied this whole idea of stability, predictability, and order as human beings, and how we, as human beings, women, men, in our personal and professional lives, how we thrive way more than we think we do on stability, on predictability, on order, on consistency, building structure and routine in our lives. And when we have that, when we have those components built into our everyday experiences, guess what? Well, it helps us to know how to cope and to navigate on a daily basis. I can tell you that every day I wake up in San Jose. I used to travel into San Francisco, not anymore, doing this differently. But the sense of just knowing what to expect, knowing the stability I have around me, knowing what I can comfortably predict is coming around the bend. All these things gave me a sense of stability, a sense of ease, if you will. There was no stress with that. There was a sense of, I know what's going to happen every day. Well, when that's changing, as it is right now in an amazing way, there's something deeper that's taking place in our own thinking, in our own lives. I used to, for part of my research on building employee engagement, focused on what managers have to do to cultivate engagement with their teams. And what's really important in managing others is really making sure that people know what to expect. And every day in our own lives, personally, professionally, we rely on what we've always known to be sufficient to carry us forward. And in psychological parlance, it's called cognitive schemas. We all have schemas that we use to operate and navigate and cope on a daily basis. They're frameworks that really give us the insights that we need to know how to work with others, to know what to expect, to know what to not expect. These schemas are the grids that kind of inform the way we see, the way we operate, the relationships that we engage in. And those schemas are critical to the way we work with others and the way we navigate every day. The schemas are the data. It tells us what to expect. It tells us what we can know, how to prepare for. And they're vital and oftentimes hidden from view. They help us operate every day. So the schemas, as leaders and managers, really are crucial to helping us know how to help others and work in organizations. And when those schemas undergo any kind of disruption or change, we struggle. Oftentimes, there's a source of anxiety and stress that emerges from that. And now we're just kind of in a place where we have to know how to deal with this. So as we set the table for this conversation, we want to acknowledge that we are in a season of disruption where everything we've expected over the years that we've come to know, rely on, prepare for, is changed. And when that changes sufficiently, when the environment around us changes sufficiently, it can begin to seep into our sense of psychological comfort, where our schemas now are called into question. We don't know what to expect. And when we don't know what to expect, we don't necessarily know what to do, then what happens? We generate a great deal of anxiety and stress. We become very uncomfortable. Certainly, as you have, I've spoken to many people, colleagues at the university, friends, here in the Bay Area, around the US, who have basically said in so many words, I just don't know how to get through this. I don't know what to expect. Uncharted waters. But I want to know how to do that. And so there's a sense of this rising tide of what do we do? How do we handle this? And that's realistic. That's what we have to look at. And that's what we're addressing in this webinar. And there's going to be other webinars that follow this that really kind of focus in on how we address this. Let's talk just a little bit about disruption's impact on the human being. I want you to think about in a time in your life when you were going through some major disruption yourself. Could have been a job change, job loss, could have been financial issues, could have been personal issues, health, marriage, family, on and on and on. But think about that. Think about some of those most difficult disruptive times and how they called into question what you've always thought was true. When your cognitive schemas, the grids that you used to operate with, you were finding were no longer true. You couldn't rely on them. What did you do? How did you handle that? Well, some of you have heard probably over the years of the acronym called VUCA, V-U-C-A. And you'll see there in the slide off to the right what VUCA stands for. Number 1, volatility. 2, uncertainty. 3, complexity. And 4, ambiguity. Now, VUCA really came into vogue probably about 20 years ago, maybe more, when business kind of stumbled on the importance of the VUCA acronym and trying to deal with the global connections, global business, how things that would happen around the world were sufficient to be disruptive wherever you were living. It first appeared as an acronym coming out of the U.S. Army War College to describe this volatile, uncertain, ambiguous multilateral world which was resulting from the end of the Cold War. All to say that after the Cold War, we were not going to know any longer what to expect. And instead of expecting consistency, order, predictability, guess what? We're now looking at volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. When we encounter in any aspect of life, as professionals or certainly personally, a disruption, unpredictable life experiences, or this kind of VUCA related experience, again, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, all this has a potential of challenging or even dismantling cognitive schemas. You've all heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, oftentimes experienced by women and men in the theater of war, could be anywhere. What PTSD essentially boils down to, it's complex, but what someone experiences in a field of battle can be absolutely disruptive to the extent that they can no longer function based on what they've known, based on what they've learned over the years. Everything changes, everything is on its head. And so there's a sense that for many people right now going through this coronavirus pandemic experience, there is a rising tide of traumatic stress, which means that those cognitive schemas that we all operate with are really being called into question. For example, I mean, every day we're seeing the news coming across our internet, or reading about it, we see it on television, whatever the case might be. The constant flow of radical change that has never happened before. For example, 6 million additional people filed for unemployment benefits. This news came out yesterday, I believe. 6 million additional people filed for unemployment benefits, bringing a 3-week unemployment total to some 18 million people. Incredible. We've not seen those numbers. Just earlier this week, the Gallup poll came out with an article called 8 in 10 U.S. are experiencing significant disruption. So the article was just kind of, as Gallup does an excellent job of reporting data that comes from their polling process. 8 in 10 in the U.S. are experiencing significant disruption in their own lives. What does that mean? It means that 8 out of 10 people at least are really not sure what to expect. And as a result, they're experiencing a rising tide of stress, anxiety that is not going away. So this, in a sense, is part of our growing reality. It's part of mine, just my own family, my colleagues that I speak to, just not knowing what to expect. We're in uncharted waters here. And so you have this sense of dis-ease and this sense of rising tide of stress and struggle. And that's a part of this process that we're kind of moving through together. The question is, how do we manage this? How do we address it? Well, here's some thoughts. When it comes to our own anxiety and stress, it's often the result of an inability to know how to cope, really, and just navigate a new and unknown environments. So I know for me personally, when I'm stressed, when I'm struggling with my own anxiety, from time to time, it gets pretty significant, just as a result of new experiences or encounters where I'm asking the question, how do I cope? How do I navigate in this new and unknown environment? And that takes time to learn to do. And so what I've learned over the years, and certainly right now, and by all means, please know that this is still an area for me that I have to work on every day, as I know it also is for many people that I work with, people that I know. I know that I have to take action when I'm feeling this rising tide of anxiety and stress. And there's some steps that I can take to address this in a way that will help me take care of my own well-being and certainly the well-being of those around me. So some thoughts. These would be actions, some activities that we can all engage in just to begin to process this disruption and to kind of be able to sustain in the middle of it. So number one is being mindful and reflective. Simply means just taking the time to dig deep enough and ask those questions about how am I doing with this disruption? Am I handling this fine? Am I feeling overwhelming sense of anxiety and stress about this, or am I in a place where I'm focused? I'm okay. But we need to take the time to ask ourselves those questions. You know, that personal reflection time, and certainly right now we have plenty of that, right? Sheltering in place. But let's be mindful of what we're going through on a personal level. Let's not skip over that. There's a lot going on. People are feeling many, many things across the board. So let's be mindful of this. Engage in personal reflection, thoughtfulness about it. Number two, understanding and moderating our own anxiety and fear. We need to be able to do that. How do we do that? It's not expecting from our environment what it cannot deliver. I mean, who would have ever thought that toilet paper would be hard to get, impossible to get? Paper towels, name it. It just makes one, on one hand, kind of smile. On the other hand, it's my gosh, this is an unknown experience. I need to be able to just navigate through it. So I've learned not to expect certain things in this environment, to let things go, to expect the unexpected, and to be okay with that. I can no longer expect my environment to deliver to me what it cannot deliver to me. So letting go of that, as strange as it sounds, is a good thing to do. I mean, it helps me to relax. It helps me to just kind of lean into learning from this and not expecting from my environment, from people, from my community, what it cannot deliver. So letting go of that. And as I hold on to that with an open hand, not clutching it tightly, my own anxiety and my own fear just seem to subside a bit. And I'm able to navigate much more effectively every day. Thirdly, let's integrate information from what may be this new normal. I don't know what that looks like, but I want to be able to pay attention and stay informed, read about what's happening, take note of the information that's important to me, and factor that into this new way of life, at least for right now. I don't want to bury my head in the sand. That's the point I want to make here. Is I don't want to turn around and turn my back because I can't bear the news that's emerging, although it's hard to read sometimes. The number of deaths, the number of job losses, the economic crisis, just one after the other. But it's being able to know this, understand it, read about it, and integrate it in a way that helps me define this new normal. I want to be informed. I want to be up to date as much as I can be. So let's take the information that's impacting us and let's integrate it into our worldview. Now, is this a new normal for a permanent period of time? I don't know. It may be. It may not be. It may be that 6 months from now, we're right back in a good, strong place economically with our educational system. Who knows? But the fact that we don't know means that we have to pay attention right now. And let's really be capturing that information that's important to us and integrating that into our worldview, our cognitive scheme, if you will, so that we can begin to live into a new normal and have that be a good thing or an okay thing. Then we want to finally here, and this may be the most important, connect and share honestly and transparently with others who are really trying to work through all this themselves. There are 2 or 3 groups that I meet with maybe every couple of weeks. And it's all, of course, on Zoom now. These are groups of people that are related to different organizations that I'm a part of. And the one common theme of each one of these gatherings is support and encouragement. Support and encouragement. That's the goal. That's the connection. And it is amazing from my perspective what happens when I'm able to gather in these Zoom rooms with people who kind of represent the same organization, in different ways, where we can talk about, hey, what are we encountering? What are we experiencing? How are we processing this? How are we dealing with it? And that connection, that sharing honestly and transparently, it makes all the difference to me. I think that to navigate this on your own, not having those meaningful connections, people to connect with, conversations to have, where we can at least work to be honest and transparent enough to say, how are you doing with this? How are you navigating this? How are you moving through this? Here's what I'm encountering. I think to not have that is really tough. I think to have it, to work toward it, to build those connections and to rely on them, especially during this period, is really, really essential. So just some thoughts for you as we kind of think about how disruption impacts our sense of well-being. Let's pay attention to our well-being and really invest in that and not just glance right over it. Really, really important. Okay, so I want to shift the conversation to how do we lead and manage differently during this time. This would kind of connect more with our work around teams and organizations. Professor Ronald Heifetz is well known for his work around adaptive leadership. And from my perspective, to know how to lead adaptively during this time is absolutely essential. So I know you can read this yourself, but let me just kind of go over it quickly with you. Adaptive leadership, the practice of mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and to thrive during the often difficult process of change. Adaptive leaders help the organization evolve through a sustained period of disequilibrium caused by internal or external change. When leaders fail to lead adaptively in the face of organizational change and instead rely on rigidity through the preservation of order in existing structures, they can perpetuate the very turbulence they wish to eliminate, and in the process, undermine their own effectiveness as leaders. This definition of adaptive leadership by Heifetz, to me, is always nailed down and always hit the center of the bullseye for how to lead during difficult times. Essentially, leaders have to be flexible. They have to be nimble. They have to be willing to give up those consistent aspects of how they've led in the past in order to embrace new ways of leading, not be so rigid that they can't be flexible, but to really bend and learn and work with others so that we can all move through change successfully, or at least more successfully than we otherwise would. But I think the point here, and Heifetz makes a great point, and that is that the more we hold on to the way we've always led, the way we've always managed with our teams and with our organizations, does not work in a season of disruption like we're going through right now. So adaptive leadership, mobilizing people to deal with the tough issues, those open, honest conversations that we have to have during difficult times of change. We evolve, we have to flex, we have to grow and develop as a result of the discontinuity, disequilibrium that we're all going through. So think about adaptive leadership. Think about how you lead adaptively, or how you have to learn to lead adaptively in terms of working with your teams and with your people. And again, Heifetz does a great job of expanding what he means by this, but for our purposes today, it's saying, look, leading and managing in a way that really works with people to move them through this time of disruption and change, to acknowledge that, to have those conversations with your team members about how difficult it is and how challenging it is, acknowledging the losses, acknowledging how difficult it is to embrace new ways of working together in this environment, having those conversations with team members, with colleagues, really is what exactly we need to be doing right now. That's kind of the focus of adaptive leadership. Heifetz really nails it here. So to be more specific, let's talk about adaptive leadership and how that forces us to see power and authority in a different way, right? So for example, if I'm leading and managing in normal times, meaning predictable times, not times of disruption, I'm going to lean on my typical way of leading and managing, using power appropriately, authority appropriately. When we're dealing with disruption and chaos, such as we're going through right now, we've got to be able to see power and authority differently as leaders and managers. So these are key thoughts here. Quickly hit them and move on. What do we need to do as leaders and managers? Well, number one, need to control less. Use power-based leadership less, and instead really work at building those connections to people and providing them what they need to gain confidence and stability. It's really about setting aside the power issues or the need to control, and to really partner with the teams, the people that I count as colleagues, so that we can all gain confidence and stability in this time of disruption and change. Number two, let's encourage participation in discovery. How do we do this? How do you do this? What can we do as a team? Some of the best ideas will always emerge from those that are closest to the work. So as leaders and managers, let's really rely on the people around us to really give us some great ideas, collaborate together on how do we do our work now? What are your insights, your ideas? How can we be efficient? How can we be effective? What are your thoughts? What do you want to bring to the table? Let's discuss that. Let's collaborate together and engage in discovery in a way that's going to help us all. That's really, really essential during times of change and disruption. A lot of people participating, everybody involved in the discovery process. Number three, let's involve others in idea generation and problem-solving collaboration. Yeah, same kind of thought there. The more we rely on others to come up with ideas and problem-solving, the better off we're going to be as leaders and managers. Let's rely much more, we may normally in the past, to tap into the strength and the ideas that others bring to the table. Four, let's keep only the most helpful practices and routines, and in the discovery process of new perspectives and approaches. Let's keep what's worked consistently from the past, and now in this new environment of change and disruption, discontinuity, let's really embrace new practices, try new processes, engage in new approaches that we think will work. Some may not, some will, but let's keep what works and let go of the rest. And let's embrace some new discovery pieces that really help us to lead and manage more effectively. So that discovery and that integration, the application, really, really essential. Let's see through the contradiction to discover new possibilities. I think that's what leaders and managers do, right? This is so unexpected. Leading and managing in a time like this is just an ongoing challenge. So the new possibilities really are oftentimes right before us. And the contradictions are oftentimes full of possibilities to lead and manage differently. These things are so hard, but what does that mean for us? We're working remotely. What does that mean? How do we engage in new possibilities of discovery and efficiencies, given this really awkward place that we're in, that we're not used to? So let's see through that. Let's look for the eyes of possibility to see what we could do differently as leaders and managers. Let's be confident and clear as communicators and be open to new information. Really important as leaders and managers that we communicate clearly, that we express confidence as much as we can, and yet be realistic with the things that we struggle with. And let's be flexible and open to new information. And then finally, let's stretch others toward a new, if unknown, future, right? So when you add these pieces up together, and remember, these are just kind of distilled off the kind of the top of Heifetz's approach to adaptive leadership. It basically sends a couple of messages. We're in this together. We're going to collaborate together. I want your ideas. Let's be flexible. Let's try new avenues. Let's work together differently. Bring your ideas to the table, no matter how ridiculous they seem, and let's see what we can do together, given this new situation and environment. Love that. Okay, the importance of agility. Finally, we just want to wrap up with this. Agility as a leader is really, really essential and vital in a time such as this. One of the clients that I work with as a leadership and management consultant is the Department of Defense. In particular, I work with the U.S. Navy around some of their largest naval shipyards on the West Coast. And when I'm working with their senior leaders, like the Department of Defense in all aspects, any government bureaucracy, there's always the template of the way you need to teach or the content you need to bring to any kind of leadership training. Well, in my work with senior leaders, you know, in naval parlance, DoD parlance, this would be GS 14s and 50s, so the highest pay grade for your senior civilian leaders. When I'm working with that group of women and men, the one theme that is mentioned over and over again is that we need to be able to be agile and pivot quickly, given this new world situation, given the kinds of ways we need to respond quickly to change, to new directions, new opportunities, but we need to be able to respond quickly. So the word agility in this context really means that we need to be able to respond quickly to the needs around us, including the needs of the people around us. So understand as leaders and managers, and change as we need to really know what the people around us need to do their best work. We want to be able to recognize opportunities to stretch beyond what comes naturally to us. Hard to do for me, but I know in naval environments, especially Navy shipyards, where they're doing major work on aircraft carriers and Trident nuclear submarines, a variety of submarines and boats. They have to be able to deploy quickly, respond quickly, and it's vital to them that they are agile enough to move quickly to what needs to happen. So recognize those opportunities and stretch beyond what comes naturally to you and help people know how to do that, learn how to do that. So here, developing agility really takes time and effort and practice. It just does. It's not easy to do. And we'll be working on this the rest of our lives, right, as leaders and managers. So some things to keep in mind. Number one, let's be open. Let's be responsive. Let's be receptive to ideas, new ways of getting work done, and being comfortable in that environment, that VUCA environment, and being able to respond and change directions quickly as we need to. That's imperative right now for leaders and managers. Now let's try things that may feel uncomfortable, but will help us navigate difficult situations. I'm all for that. I'm not real good at it sometimes, but I know that if I'm going to have to thrive in this situation, I'm going to have to be able to try things out. And some of those things are not going to work well. Some things may. But as a leader and a manager, department chair at the university, no matter what it is, we're going to try it out. We're going to see how it fits. And if it helps us be more effective, then we're going to move forward with that. And then just try new mindsets that will better align with the situation that you're facing. Just keep in mind that cognitive schema that you work with all the time. Be flexible, be open, be receptive. Make sure that you're not limiting yourself or constraining yourself by living every day with a mindset that no longer serves you well, especially in the season of disruption. Really important to acknowledge that. So being agile, vital in this environment, and critical to who we are as leaders and managers and being successful there. Okay, we're right at about 11:40. Priscilla, I'm going to hand it back to you because we've come to the point in the presentation where we just want to hear some thoughts and insights, maybe some questions about how folks are navigating, how people are dealing with the challenges to their own sense of well-being, issues of agility. Wide open here. So I'm going to hand it back to you and let's take some questions and thoughts.
Thanks, Jeff, for a thought-provoking lecture today. We have a question from Joe. How do we encourage people to engage in self-care when the productivity and being a go-getter are part of many work cultures, even in this new environment?
Priscilla, so one more time, please. You cut out there a little bit.
Sorry about that. How do we encourage people to engage in self-care when productivity and being a go-getter are part of many work cultures, even in this new environment?
Right, right. Yeah, it's a great question. I think that the self-care piece is always going to be a challenge. Certainly, I know that we want the people that work on our teams to be aggressive, go-getters, to be entrepreneurial. We want them to hustle, whatever they need to do to be successful. in a way that supports the mission and vision of the team. We're always going to value that, and that's kind of the way we're hardwired, I think, in the West sometimes, in terms of the way we get business done. The self-care piece is, I think, one of the most easily overlooked when it comes to this whole notion of leading, managing, working hard. And how do we know that? Well, we tend to pay a big price for not taking care of ourselves. So I think as someone who's in a position of leading and managing or working with others, one of the best ways to encourage self-care is really two things. Number one, take care of yourself as a leader and manager and be transparent with that. And then I think number two, openly discuss that with your colleagues, with your team members. How are you navigating? Ask some pretty open-ended questions. How are you handling this? You taking care of yourself? What do you need? What's the most challenging here? But I think to make the implicit explicit by simply talking about it really is one of the best places to begin. I think one of the worst things to do is to not acknowledge the obvious and not raise those questions at all, or not giving people a chance to share what they're going through in a way that would open up the door to other conversation about how to sustain one's well-being.
Thank you, Jeff. And everyone on the call, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself to ask your question or to type in your question in the chat window. Another question that we have, Jeff, you talked about being agile and being able to respond quickly and to pivot. But can you share a little bit more on how can I, as an individual, be more agile?
Right, great thought, great question. When I think of agility, how can I respond quicker to new opportunities that present themselves or challenges? I think number one, I just need to be aware of it. It's important for me to move through every day with that mindset, not the limiting mindset, but the mindset that says, when there's a change to the way that I normally get work done, the way I normally navigate every day, I want to be open to that. And I want to be willing to try something different. I want to be willing to engage in some discovery and just to attempt. So oftentimes when I've just done the attempt, when I've given myself the opportunity to do something different, it's made a big difference. It hasn't always succeeded, but I think for me, it's that mindset. I think it's Carol Dweck at Stanford University talks about the kind of mindset that opens us up to the new possibilities around us. Instead of a limiting mindset, we want to embrace that growth mindset, right? That says, let's see what happens here. So for me, and just my own immediate response to that question would be, I want to be aware of it. I want to think about it. I want to have that front of mind so that when I'm encountering a new way of thinking, a new way of doing something, a new way of partnering, a new way of collaborating, a new process of discovery, I don't want to shut it off immediately and say, I've never done that and I'm not going to, but rather I want to say, these times are different. And I know I'm going to be more effective if I can learn from this, try it, attempt it, talk about it with colleagues or friends or team members, and see how this unfolds. So I think it's that sense of approaching something with that growth mindset, open it up, give it a shot, try it, talk about it, debrief it, after action reviews, whatever it takes, and learn from it, integrate the new information and move forward.
Thank you. Another question. Go ahead,
Hello.
please.
Hi, thank you, Jeff. I just want to add some thing to the growth mindset. My daughter is in second grade, and now they are working on this topic. What is a fixed mindset? What is a growth mindset? And especially in learning math, it's really important to make more connections and the practice. So I think it's that kind of thinking. If we make some practice about it, like you say, collaborating with our colleagues, or just reflecting at how those will be our best buddies during this process to get this growth mindset. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, very great point. Great point. There's so much to mine, so much richness to mine that growth mindset approach. And I think for leaders and managers, especially those of us that are a little older, it's so easy to not engage in that growth mindset. And if there was ever a time to make sure we did that, it's now. I mean, it's kind of like, look, Jeff, engage in the growth mindset, or you're just going to box yourself right out or paint yourself into a corner. I have to do it. I have to do it. May not want to do it, but I need to do it. I want to do it. I have to do it. And let's see what happens as a result. I know there's no turning back. And I think that's really one of the important aspects of this season of disruption, is that we can't necessarily rely on going back to what we've always known. It's time to really open ourselves up in new ways. And it's hard. This is not easy. But I think it's the way forward.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Jeff, this is Mai. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I can hear you, right?
Perfect. Hi there. It's good to hear from you again. If I may, I actually wanted to give some thoughts as to a contextual example of how we might bridge the two questions that came through around how do we as leaders go to that place with our teams and our staff, and how do we use that growth mindset. You know, one of the things that I was thinking about is if we just, for a second, ignore COVID for a moment, ignore the environment around us, and just think about the diversity of our people and the uniquenesses of them with or without this pandemic that's happening. And then you layer on this pandemic, that individuality still exists. So when we think about growth mindset in that space, how each of us personally and how our teams individually are impacted is different personally, whether it's through the family environment. I have 2 kids, I have 5 kids, I have no kids, I'm by myself, I have 10 people in my house. So one of the things that I did on one of my teams, which full transparency, when we were thinking about it, I was like, I don't know how effective this will be. So let me throw away my fixed mindset here and put on my let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens. We did an activity where we each took turns, and it was a small activity, small group, so 4 or less people. And all we did, the rules of the exercise was you let the person talk for 2, 5, whatever minutes, however much time you can allocate, and you just let each person talk for 5 minutes. No questions, no follow-ups, no solutioning, nothing other than just actively listening and just being there for that person in that moment. And in that form, it's just listening. And I got to tell you, it was such a powerful exercise, because just sitting in that moment, in that space, acknowledging it, some of the points you were talking about it, and giving a forum for someone else to say what's going on was really powerful. So just wanted to give that example if others are looking for what this could look like in a specific activity or tool to take away. I really thought giving the space for that physically, mentally, could be a way to bridge that growth mindset, and also us leading our teams in this new world.
Yeah, excellent. Very great illustration. I love it. There's an exercise that I've done with teams before called the yes and experience. It's much, I don't know if it's much the same as what you just described, but it's when you're brainstorming, you're doing some discovery, and you put the idea or the objective out there for the entire team, and everybody has a chance to share what their solution is or what their idea is. And there's no limitations. There's no bounds, right? So people just begin to share their ideas and thoughts. And when they're done, the next person says, yes, and then they kind of add their idea. And then the third person says, yes, and what happens over time is that you generate these amazing ideas, discovery process pieces that really, some are not going to fit, but some are. But as you said, it kind of creates a space for discovery, for openness, in a way that affirms what everybody brings to the table, and no one is correcting anybody else. No one can say, that's a crazy idea, that would never work, that wouldn't work for us. You just don't do that. You can't go there in that process. So anyway, great idea, good thoughts, things that we can implement, definitely. Thank you for that.
Yep.
Dr. Yergler, this is Chris Ospina. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hey, great. Nice hearing from you. This is a great lecture series. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, with having to have the growth mindset, having to be agile and aware of everything that's going on right now, remind us how we can kind of take care of ourselves, our mind frame, how we can rebalance it from time to time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I was hoping you could share that with us.
Oh, okay. Yes. Some
I
things
mean, if
that
you have an idea, it'd be great to hear from you.
Oh yeah, some things I was thinking is like just practice mindful techniques like breathing and kind of centering yourself, being present, maybe doing that with a spouse or a friend, maybe using that before and opening like meetings in your Zoom meetings, stuff like that. I think those things will help a lot for resetting and rebalancing the mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I just totally agree with you. I would add a couple of thoughts. If you're leading Zoom meetings, there's some really creative ways you can start off with those conversations, right? Asking questions, thoughts for reflection. I mentioned earlier in the webinar just the importance of connecting and building community and using one's network. I think that having spontaneous Zoom meetings with colleagues to address just the question of what are you thinking about? What are you doing? How are you keeping that balance? How are you rebalancing? What are you finding the most difficult? Where are the opportunities here? But I think it's when you, as the leader, the manager, kind of bring those opportunities, the questions, raise the issues, and give people a chance to respond. That does more to help people rebalance than about anything else. It's when we don't do that. It's when we hold it close to the vest, when we don't give ourselves, much less others around us, the chance to really think through that. I think that really can stunt our growth and our ability to be adaptive in this environment. So how do we rebalance? We do it. We invite feedback from those around us, spouses, people that know us. We have to open ourselves up to that feedback and to be able to share enough that says, look, I'm not doing well, or I'm struggling here. What are you doing to manage this? Or here's some things that work for me. But that's a great way to rebalance, and that we have to keep on doing it, and stay fresh in that area.
We have another question from the chat. Jeff, what are some mindfulness practices in the workplace that you found most effective?
Right. Well, just some things that work for me. Just really some dedicated moments of focused reflection on a topic or a theme, where I might be asking myself the question, how am I handling my own stress today? Some really good friends of mine are getting laid off. My own concerns for my own financial well-being, but focusing on that, thinking on that, making sure that I'm breathing sufficiently enough to get that deep reflection kind of moving within me. And I do that maybe 2 or 3 times a day, no matter where I find myself. I'm not someone who's ever been into yoga, but I do a lot of walking. I do a lot of exercise. And those are moments for me of sustained reflection. I have conversations with myself. I'd be embarrassed if anybody heard me, but it's where I have those conversations. I'm thinking out loud, reflecting, debriefing what I'm thinking and feeling. So for me, that's what works. It's kind of like if I can't create the environment in any given day, then I'll take advantage of where I'm at right now to just spend a few minutes, maybe 30 seconds, asking a question and answering that and just pondering that. And that's what works for me. We're all gonna have to get there differently, right? But that we do something that works for us is really absolutely essential.
Thank you. I'll pause for a moment, and if anyone would like to unmute themselves and ask Jeff a question, the floor is yours. We have another question, Jeff. You mentioned in your presentation today a few different steps to address our own anxieties and our own fears to take care of our well-being. What would you say? How would you rank which practice to implement in our lives, a mindfulness and personal reflection, or would it to integrate information from what may be our new normal? How would you, and what new practice would you encourage us to start?
Great. So what new practice to start, what new step to take as a place to begin? I can just share this with you anecdotally. I know that when I'm feeling anxiety as a result of not necessarily knowing how to navigate a new situation, when I'm not transparent with that internal stress, that stress just tends to grow. It tends to multiply, and it has a larger and larger impact on me systemically. And then it starts expressing itself through me to others, which I don't want. So for me, there are some key connections in my life where I can say to someone, maybe it's my spouse, maybe it's a friend or colleague, others, where when the anxiety and the stress is significant enough, that means if I'm not processing it effectively, then that means I need to have a conversation. That means I need to have some honest back and forth with someone I know knows me, who cares for me, supports me, who can give me feedback about what I'm experiencing. And oftentimes, as strange as it sounds, just that debrief, just that conversation, opening up the door to that conversation really begins to free me up to think about something differently. Oftentimes my own anxiety and stress dealing with massive change is the result of me just running out of options. I don't know what else is available to me to move forward. And I find that through conversations with key folks, they will say, as it's already been mentioned here during the webinar, they will suggest ideas and thoughts and different steps to take. And it 9 times out of 10, that really does tend to resolve it, or at least mitigate it. And it may be that I have to come back time and time again to that. But for me, it's the thinking, the reflecting, that mindfulness, but that's followed immediately, for Jeff anyway, it's followed by conversations with people where I can say, here's what I'm thinking, here's what's impacting me. It's beginning to paralyze me. Give me some feedback. What do you think about this? What are different ways of framing this up? And that really is a gift, many occasions, to help mitigate the anxiety and stress.
Thank you, Jeff. That brings us to the end of our hour. Thank you all so very much for joining us for our first GGU Presents. I welcome you to view the other webinars that we have. And I would like to take a moment, Jeff, thank you again.
Hey, thank you,
so
Priscilla. Good job. Thanks for putting this together. Really appreciate it very much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.